I'm joined by Dr. Roger Gewolb, who's the CEO of Fair Money, personal finance and credit expert. Roger, thank you so much for joining me. Just looking back, not long ago, you seem to be singing the praises of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, yet the vision that they've set out is already seems to be, dare I say it, ebbing away at a rate of knots. I mean, we don't know what's coming from 1 minute to the next. What are your feelings about what's going on?
Well, I think that they've been quite naive in the way they've introduced their view for a brave new world, and it's all fallen apart. I think that the King saying "dear oh dear" the other day when Liz entered for her first audience with him is classic British understatement. If it had been the White House instead of Buckingham Palace, I can only imagine what they would have said. I think that I can't stop thinking about the fact that, well, Jeremy Hunt said today in his speech that they did two things wrong. Number one was to reduce the top income tax rate from 45% to 40%. And the other was not to be prepared, not to have the usual backup of the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. I credit where it's due, of course, because I think that they've done more to reduce inequality in some domains than any politician has done in 100 years. They have reduced the gap between billionaires and multimillionaires tremendously, haven't they?
Yes, exactly. But as you said, but let's have a look at what's going on. First of all, how it and Ali Mirage covered that, coming out of a very difficult time for the country, for the world, in fact, post COVID, what's going on in Ukraine and what have you. If Jeremy Hunt had all of this wisdom, it makes one wonder why there wasn't broader consultation before they let these fireworks off. Well, before the Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, fireworks. Why was there no consultation? If there was all this wisdom in the party, why was nothing said?
Hubris, arrogance. I mean, the normal pattern is to consult with the Bank of England, the Treasury, and the Office of Budget Responsibility before you release a budget. You can call it a fiscal event, Trisha. That's kind of like calling a fabulous wedding a function because you actually don't like the bride very much. I mean, why in the world didn't they go talk to them? Some of the world's greatest economists have commented on this, and the point is he really, Kwasi, set a trap for himself. In other words, when the OBR comes out on October 31st, or perhaps now even before, and says your figures were wrong, then all bets are off. If they say your figures were right, he still loses, because why in the world wasn't there that consultation to back up what they were saying on the day?
So now Jeremy Hunt's the person, the cleanup man. What does he need to do? What are the major things he needs to do? Because what is the pound at?
112.
Barely, for me in the States, that's just horrific.
Terrible.
But what are the major things he needs to do to, Liz Truss has already said they scared the markets. I mean, a master of understatement. But what does he need to do to make the city, I'm not going to say comfortable, but a little less reaching for the Pepto-Bismol or what have you?
Well, I think, first of all, the main question you're asking listeners today, and that you asked your previous guest, Ali, who would you vote for? I'm not so sure, Trisha. I wouldn't be surprised. The country could not possibly suffer another 6-week interregnum Reid circus to elect a new prime minister. The country wouldn't stand for it, and the Tories couldn't withstand it. I personally wouldn't be surprised if this isn't a very polite Tory way of giving Jeremy Hunt the prime ministership that he always wanted, with, in a short period of time, Liz being asked to step aside as she's just done with Kwasi. If Jeremy can show he's a safe pair of hands and can get control of things, my prediction is that he'll be prime minister in not very long. What should he do? I think 3 things. The first thing he should do is to raise the tax threshold for low earners. I mean, you don't pay any tax if you earn less than £12,570, right? That should be raised to £20,000. How in the world, what kind of schoolboy naivete would have them chop the 45% to 40 and not think about the poorer people, the whole red wall sympathies that they would have lost by simply raising that tax threshold? It's incomprehensible they didn't think of that. The second thing that they should do is something about interest rates. Now, I've been banging on for years and years, months and months about the fact that we should not be raising interest rates. The only reasons that we're raising interest rates, I believe, are because Andrew Bailey and the Bank of England are in a bit of an internecine fight with Liz Truss because she threatened to take away the independence of the Bank of England, and because they want to keep pace with the dollar. Well, I think keeping pace with the dollar over the short term, compared to the suffering of people who are going to lose their homes, who can't afford their mortgages. I'm wearing my in-debt badge today because that's pretty much how everybody feels at the moment. It's just terrible. So what about the dollar? Stop raising interest rates. We've gone from 0.1% to 2.25% in the last year, and it's going to get worse and worse. It's unnecessary. We are not in the kind of inflation they have in the States. We are in what's called cost push inflation, where outside factors, materials and services like gas and electricity, etc., cost more. It's not consumer demand. It's not Trisha Goddard who needs another Prada handbag this week. Consumers are not overspending. They're actually cutting back. I'm meeting people all over the country. I'm sitting with them at their dining room tables, listening to them. At least they're Brits, so they've got this World War II resolute spirit, and they're singing, "We'll eat again, don't know where." How can you raise...
Don't know what.
Yeah, don't know what. How can you raise interest? How can you make somebody who doesn't want to borrow, who now has to borrow money, okay? How can you make them pay more to borrow that money? Jeremy Hunt needs to coax the Bank of England or coerce the Bank of England to stop with the interest rates already. In fact, cut them back. That's the second thing. The third thing is that they need to decouple electricity and gas. Two-thirds of our home energy bills are electricity. But a little-known fact is that almost 80% of the electricity that we use has nothing to do with gas. It comes from other sources, nuclear, solar, wind, and our own gas resources here in the UK. And yet the price of electricity is still pegged to the international gas market price because of conventions that were set back in the 80s when they nationalized them. Everybody's been saying these should be decoupled for years. Boris even said it in June. John Penrose, the MP who invented the price cap, which, by the way, he says is no longer fit for purpose, says they must decouple these immediately. It would take something like £60 billion off the 150 that she's going to spend that is only being paid unnecessarily to the electricity providers. Those are the three first things they should do.
But what if you know this, and I'm sure you're not the only one, we're not talking about, state secrets here. It does suggest, it's interesting. One of the phrases that Liz Truss has used in the past is that we are listening. They're clearly not. I mean, they're not listening to the very people you sit down with at their dining room tables. There seems to have been a tone deafness from the word go. And that ultimately is going to cost this party many, many votes, isn't it? And there's nothing people hate more than feeling that they're completely disregarded, not listened to. We know, the nanny state, it's interesting. They talk about devolution or not being a nanny state on one hand, but there seems to be this, we know what's best for you. We don't need to listen to anything or anyone. This is what's good for you today, and then we'll change it tomorrow. And then if you don't like the message, we'll change the next person, making it up as they go along.
And how can you hear that message from somebody who constantly has their foot in their mouth? It's unbelievable. I keep having this vision, I don't know why, that flashes before me of a senior naval officer who has spent decades on the bridges of various battleships, destroyers, and aircraft carriers, all of a sudden being catapulted into command of our new 3.5 billion pound aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. And on her maiden voyage as commander, as captain, she crashes into the dock on her way out of port. Can you picture the Royal Navy saying, look, anyone can make a mistake. It's a new ship. Give her a new ship. I don't think so. Give her a new ship. Nope.
Exactly. And it's also doing a lot of damage. I mean, we're talking about within Britain, but markets, of course, are international. It is doing, when you read the US press, the Australian press, all over, it is doing Britain's image as, you know, a certain image. It's doing them untold harm. When you think after the Queen's funeral, if you want to talk about good, warm feelings towards Britain and renewed interest in Britain, as I mean, you know, as regards trade, tourism, you know, all of those things, that seems to have been lost very, very quickly. I mean, the damage, the things you read in the press around the world makes me embarrassed to be, you know, living here.
I have never seen such a great country fall so far, so fast to become the pariah of the international financial markets. It was so maladroit and naive. Liz says it was just cosmetics, you know, it was presentation. But, you know, one day the Bank of England was not rescuing the British economy by agreeing to buy 65 billion pounds worth of bonds. One day, people were not losing their homes, and the next day it was. How can that possibly be global forces?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So much. Thank you so much for that view, Roger. And it'd be interesting to talk to you later on when Jeremy Hunt has finally got, well, he may well then be leader. But let me ask you this before you go. If he does become leader, then who takes his role? Do you think he'd re-invite Rishi Sunak back?
I don't think so, because I think that Rishi, who's obviously, you know, very, very skilled. I mean, before the 6-week campaign, I just kept saying, I think that Rishi and Liz are stupendous cabinet ministers, but I don't really see them as prime ministerial material. And I think too many people blame Rishi for stabbing Boris in the back. I mean, many of Boris's wounds were, of course, self-inflicted, but I just think there's a lot of bad feeling there. I don't think that would be a wise choice for Jeremy. There's plenty of other people.
It'll be an interesting one as to who he actually goes for.
Yeah.
But I think your idea, well, it'll be interesting to talk to you to see if your vision of the future comes to fruition. I think, Jeremy Hunt sort of very nicely stepping into the breach, and at least you'd have a feeling of statespersonship.
It's a very polite conservative.
The neutral term.
It's a very polite. I'm sorry for talking over you. It's a very polite conservative move. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm sure we'll talk again later. Dr. Roger Gewolb there,